Hi, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and in this week's video we have Move Column on single click, where we're going to show you how to move any column simply by single clicking to the left or the right, where we can easily move columns. It's going to save a lot of time and it's a great feature. So I'm excited to show you this. Let's get started. Okay, great, and welcome to this week's training where we have one-click move columns, as we stated before. And what that does is it's going to show you icons on selection of any header item, and those icons are going to allow you to move that selected column either right or left. And we have both left and right icons, and on the first column we only have a right icon, and on the left column we only have the left column. So we have a few different things to code in for that to make that happen. But this training is going to save you a lot of time, because often we want to be able to move columns, and also on the applications that you release. If you release the ability to display reports, you could put this in a report as well. So there's no limitations to this type of functionality, and in fact it's very easy to complete and very easy to do. So anybody could do this with just a little bit of training in macros, and I'm going to show you all of that right now. First up, let's go ahead and take a look at these icons, and let's go ahead and duplicate it so we can see how I did create that. We're going to duplicate it just so I can show you, and I'm going to increase it. And basically what this is a group of 3 shapes. So I'm going to ungroup it here, and we can go through ungrouping. I've got it on a shortcut, but also under format here, format, into the format here, and then clicking group or ungroup. We can also add items to the menu, to the quick access menu, by clicking on the more commands here as well. So I've ungrouped this, and I have just 3 shapes. And when you click on them, simply ungroup those, and I'll show you. I have an arrow that I've created, and I have basically 2 rectangles that I've colored differently. So when combined, that is how I've created the icon. And also the other icon is simply just a reverse of this. So I took this particular icon, these 3, and all I did was just reverse them for the other one by rotating them, and then I'll just flip them horizontally, and that's how I created the other one. So it's very, very simple to achieve that icon. In this case, I used Excel's own shapes to do that, so it's very easy. Let's go ahead and highlight those and delete them. We don't need those. We have our own. And then what I did is I gave each one a specific name. I've grouped them, and then I've given them a name. In fact, this one I've called Move Left Button, and likewise this one I've called Move Right Button. So they have specific names, and when we name them, it's much easier to recognize them within the VBA code. So I always like to name my shapes, especially those. And I've assigned them macros. And how do we assign macros once we've created the group? We're going to right click, but we're actually going to right click individual shapes within the group to see what those macros are. Right click, assign macro, and we see that it's move left column. Now to assign a macro, we can assign a macro to a group simply by right clicking on that group, going to assign macro, and then selecting whatever macro we want to assign. Now keep this in mind: when we assign a macro to a group, there is no macro assigned to the group. Excel automatically assigns the macro to the individual shapes within the group. So keep that in mind. When you want to know what macro has been assigned, you actually cannot select the group. You'll actually want to select one of the individual shapes within the group, right click, click assign macro, and then you can see that this has been assigned to the move column left macro. So that is how that gets assigned. So basically the idea is, when I select anything other than a header row, I don't want to show any icons. When I select a header row, I want 2 icons to appear. However, if it's a left, I just want the right icon to appear, and if it's a right, I just want the left. Now how do we know the difference? Well, we're going to use there's a few different techniques. What I did in Excel is I said, if there is no data in here, then just show the left button. If there's no data, if there's no text or data here in this this cell, then only show the right icon. So that is how we did it. Also, selecting and highlighting the selected row is a feature we've been over before. I'll go over that one more time. Basically, all that I did was within the VBA code is take that selected row and put it into B1 right here. So B1 is our selected row, and then I've assigned conditional formatting. Let's go over, there's two conditional formats in this table. Let's go over both of those. Under the home menu, we'll click on conditional formatting, and we'll take a look in the manage rule, and we don't need some extra rules, so we can go ahead and delete these. But basically what we have is the ability, B1 is the row. When we edit this row, B1, that is the row. So when our selected row equals in B1, it's going to color that row, and this is going to apply to, let's go ahead and make sure we've selected the entire table, applies to the entire table. Great. Now we can remove these duplicates. We don't need these. The other one rule that we need is the mod rule, and that is going to color even rows. That is going to color our even rows. So how do we do that? Edit rule. Click on it, and there's two conditions. It's going to be the even row, which is mod row, and then 2 equals 0. So that's an even row. And what is our second condition? If k 10 equals, let's go ahead and fix that up. I want to make sure that in this case D4 is not empty. So we're going to put that in there. D4 is not empty, and we're going to remove the $sign. Right? We want this to apply to every single row in this table. So that way we can only color rows with values. Right now they're all colored. You see that? But I want to change that. Let's go ahead and change that. Click OK. And the two things we want to make sure is this also has to start with D. Okay, we've got our applies to here. Let's go ahead and apply it to there. So remember, the important thing is this must have D, and there must be no $sign before there. And this must start with D, but this one can have a $sign. This can be. Okay, so when we apply that, and you'll see now that only those rows with data have that conditional formatting that covers the even rows there. All right, moving right along, we can go ahead and hide these columns now. And let's go ahead and go into the VBA code so we can see actually what is going on here. And basically the idea of what I want to do is I want to display these icons, but on the rightmost table I only want to display the left icon, and on the leftmost column I only want to display the move right icon. So that is in effect what I want to do. Let's go ahead and do developers code. In the developers tab you'll see the Visual Basic. You can also click Alt F11. If you don't have the Visual Basic or Developers tab available, you can click on the File and go ahead and go into the Options. Under the Customize ribbon, you can find the Developers here. Make sure you select that so that you can display it. We're going to go ahead and go into it now, and let's take a look. There's just a little bit of on-sheet code here. And first of all, our first line of code, we only have one sheet, and there's some code that's on the sheet itself. The first thing we want to do is we want to do this line of code if target count is greater than what exit sub, and that's going to help us prevent bugs so that when we select a large number of cells, we're not going to get a bug. This particular selection change, this is what puts our highlighted row. If the user selects any cell within D4 through K999 and D and the target row does not equal empty, then B1 is going to equal that target row. And we just went over that where B1 is a target, and that means if they select anything that doesn't contain a value in column D, nothing is going to happen. But as soon as they select a row which does have data in column D, it's going to go ahead and highlight that row. So that's covered. We've been there before, but I wanted to go over that with you again. And next up in Visual Basic, we have our work that we're going to do to display those left and right buttons. So basically, if a user makes a selection change either from D3 through K3, we want something to happen. Now, what is it that we want to happen? Well, if they select anywhere from D3 all the way over to K3, we want to display those buttons. But what if they select outside I don't want to show those buttons. If they select outside, I want to hide those buttons. If they select above or they select below or anywhere else, I want to hide those buttons. So we can do that with just a little bit of code. So what we're going to say is if they select D through K, then we're going to run this macro. That's going to display our buttons. And I'll go over that macro with you shortly. However, if they select anything outside this range, that would be else, then I want to do two things. I want to move this button, I want to hide. Move right button visible equals false. The move left button visible equals false. That is how we get those buttons to hide. We're not deleting them, we're just hiding them once we select outside this range. That is all for the on sheet code. Let's move into the macros that cover our buttons and moving those columns. It's quite simple. And that would be in our move columns macro. Let's go in here. Our move columns module here, we have just three macros. We have the display the buttons, that's going to display our buttons. We have a move column right macro, and we have a move column left macro. We also have code reset, and you've seen this before perhaps, and all that this macro does, stop calculations, is it brings calculations to manual and screen updating to false. And we use this when we run macros in order to speed up our code. However, when we do have this in a macro, we have to make sure that before the macro ends that we reset those calculations by running this macro here. And that will bring our calculations back to automatic and bring our screen updating to true. Those things are required for normal Excel use. However, during macro running, we may not need those. And I've used those in this as well, in our other macros down here. Let's go ahead and go over how we display our buttons first. Now, once again, let's go over the functionality. When I click on a column, when there's no data to the right, I want only the left button appear. When I select on a column in which there's no data in the column to the left, then I want only the right button to appear. So we're going to do that in the code, and I'm going to show you how that was done. And we're going to be working with the active sheet. So keep that in mind. You always want to be on the current sheet. This allows you to use this code in any sheet you're working with. And we're going to be focused on the cells. And we're going to say if the active cell row, the current row, plus the column to the right, so whatever you select, we're going to focus on the column to the right. As long as that's not empty, then we can display the right button. So for example, the column to the right here contains cell phone. It's not empty, so I can display this right column. Again, the column to the right contains notes, so it's not empty. However, when we click on cell phone, there's nothing to the right, therefore I don't want to display that right button. That's the functionality that we're working on. So as long as it's not empty, we can display the right button, and we display the right button with these lines of code right here. First, we're going to be working with the active shapes move right button. So all of this code here is focused on this move right button. The first thing we want to do with that move right button is display it with the first line of code. Visible equals MSO, see true. That's going to display it. Next up, we want to position it, and we can position it with these four lines of code actually. The first of which is I want to display it to the left of the current column. And why do we do that? To the right, +1, column +1. I want to display it on the right. Why do we do that? Well, the idea is that no matter how wide this column is, I want that button to hug the edge. When we increase it and we click it, it's always going to hug, it's always going to be right on that edge, and I want to do that. Now, how do we do that? Well, what we can do is I can place it right in column G actually. I can place that button in one column over to the right and then move it through what's called increment left. Increment left negative is going to move it about 16 pixels to the left. So we can do that through increment. That way, no matter how wide or how narrow our column is, it's always going to place that icon right on the edge. And so we can do that using increment. So what we're going to do is we're going to place it one column. Right? The left is going to be placed one column to the right of our active column. Our active cell column is here. One column to the right is going to place it there. We're also going to place it on the top. We want it in the current row, so this is going to place it in the current row. Again, we want to increment it left -16. If this was only, let's say, 5, right, it would not go far enough over. So if we placed it there and we click here, see how now it's hovering that column border. I don't want that. I want to place it right on the inside. So when we don't put enough negative left, it's not going to go far enough. So that's why 16 is about right. So we have it at 16. The increment top 4, if I just keep this at 1, it's not going to be down far enough. So when we put it, you see how now it's kind of hugging the top. You could put it there, but I want it in the middle. So I've added 4 pixels so that it places it a little bit down farther. So that is how we position the right button. So this is if it's not empty, the column. But what if it is column empty? Well, then we see this else. If it is empty, then I don't want to display the right button because we cannot move the column to the right because there's nothing, it's the end of the table. So in that case, if it is empty, hide the move right button. Make sure it's visible equals false, so we want to hide it. And we've done the same thing for the left button, but basically the opposite. Here we're saying if the column to the left, the value of that header column is not empty, then we want to display the left button. We can do that here. Active Sheets move button with this left button. We want to make it visible, MS true. We want to also place it to the left. This time we don't need to increment it. We just need to place it right on the left. I did slightly place it, increment to left. It brings it just a little bit to the right. And the same thing for the top. So that'll position our left button right on the edge of that column border, which is where we want to display. Else, that means if it's not empty. But what if the left is empty? If the column to the left is empty, then I don't want to display that left button. I want to hide it. So the Active Sheet Shapes move button left should be false, meaning I want to hide it. That covers how to display the buttons. That is it. So that one single macro will always display our buttons accordingly. It will always display them in the right position, and it will only display the left button on the rightmost column. It will only display the right button on the leftmost column, and for the interior columns, it will display both buttons. So that's how that works. Now we're going to get into the macros that move the button. And when I move the column, what I want to do is this. Let's say I want to move column ID to the right. Manually, what we're going to do is we're going to take this column, we're going to copy it, and we're going to paste it. We're going to copy it, and we're going to paste this entire column way over in column ZZ right here. I'm going to paste it right here. I'm going to paste it all. I'm going to paste everything. It's just a column that we're going to use that's far off our data sheet. Make sure that you're not using column ZZ for anything. If you can, go even farther away. So once I've copied this over, then if I'm moving it to the right, I want to move this city to the left. So then I'm going to take city, I'm going to copy this column, copy it, and I'm going to paste it right here. I'm going to paste everything here, and I'm going to also paste the column width because I want the same width. So I want to use the same width. So we've done that. Now we have city in both of these, right? So now what I'm going to do, the third step, I'm going to go back to ZZ. I'm going to copy whatever we have here, and I'm going to paste it right in this column here, city. So that's what we're going to do through the code. That's going to get us to switch those, and we're going to walk through that right now within the code. So move column right. That is the code that we've assigned to that right button. And first of all, we've dimensioned active column as long. And of course, we're going to be working with the active sheet. So everything we do within this code is going to work with the active sheet. So the first thing we want to define is the column that we're on. We're going to dimension that active column as our variable, and it's long, and it's going to be the active cell column. I want to put that into a variable. Next up, we're going to stop calculations. This is going to make it faster. This is going to turn calculations to automatic, and it's going to turn screen updating to false, as we've gone over those macros before. All right, next up, what I want to do is I want to take that current column, the one that we're on, and I want to copy it. that this is going to be a range. The first part of this range, the first cell of this range, is going to be the column header, which is 3, the row is 3, and the current column. The last cell of this range is going to be 99. Now change this number. If your data contains 2,000 rows, this should be 999. Okay, make sure you change that to whatever the utmost row of your data, well beyond whatever your data is, so that you copy all of the data. So that's the second part of our range. Now we're going to go ahead and take that range and we're going to copy it. And then we're going to move over to ZZ3. ZZ is the column that is way off our sheet. We're going to paste all that. We're going to paste everything. Pasting everything, and now we're also going to paste the column widths. I want to make sure that those column widths, whatever the width of that column is, I want to make sure that that gets pasted over too, because when I bring it back into the table, I want to make sure that we also paste in those column widths. All right, next up, now that we've got our selected column pasted over to ZZ, now what I want to do is I want to move to the column to the right, the active column plus 1. I want to copy that column also to row 99, the first row, the first cell of that row being row 3, column plus 1, the last cell being row 99, and then of course the column 1. We're going to copy that. We're going to paste that into our current column, just as I walked you through. Our current column, we're going to paste that. We're going to paste everything in, and we're going to paste the column width. So we're going to paste all that in. And our last step of this macro is we're going to pull whatever we copied into column ZZ. We're going to take that entire column and we're going to paste that into one column to the right. Pasting that in is going to, and we're going to paste in those column widths. The next step, the last thing I want to do is I want to clean up things up. So first of all, I want to clear column ZZ. Whatever we placed in ZZ, I want to clear it. And clearing, and remember, clearing is going to clear everything. It's going to clear our formats. It's going to clear our borders. It's going to clear any background colors. It's going to clear any conditional formatting. So clear kind of cleans things up. Then we're going to clear up those dancing ants. That's the application clipboard that dances around. Those ants around those cells, we're going to turn that off by application cut copy mode equals false. And the next step, I want to select the rightmost column. Why do I want to select the column to the right? Because I want to make it easy for the user to move it again. For example, if we move home phone to the right, I also want to select that right column so he can move it again and move it again and move it again. And the same thing for the left. If I'm moving it left, I want to select that left column again so that they can quickly move it over and over and back again. So it's that moved column. It allows the user to move it again just by another click. So that is why we select it. All right, now for the last macro, move column to the left. We're going to do everything exactly the same, but in the opposite. We're going to copy our current column and we're going to paste that in Z just like we did before. However, this time the column to the left gets copied. The column to the left, which is the active column -1. That is the column that we're going to copy, and we're going to paste that into our current column. We're pasting everything, including the column widths. Then we're going to take whatever we put in column ZZ and we're going to paste that into the column to the left, -1. Active column -1 is the column to the left, pasting everything including the column widths, clearing out ZZ, removing the dancing ants by cut copy mode equals false, and then we're going to select the column to the left. That is how we do it there, and then we reset the calculations. So it's just those three macros that allow us to get amazing kind of functionality. It's going to let us move over quickly and easily columns so that we don't have to. While this is just a little bit of code and it's very easy to recreate, you can recreate this for any table, and it's even more powerful in reports. If you have reports that you're giving your customers, you can give them the ability to move over columns, and it's really powerful if they're going to be printing reports but they want a certain column in a certain way and they want to display it. You can give your customers, your boss or your business or anybody in your company this ability, and you're going to look like Superman when you're able to give them this kind of feature and functionality, and you don't need to tell them. It was that easy to program. All right, so that'll be our secret. I hope you have loved this video. If you do, please like and share as you always do. I really appreciate your continued support, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, or any other social media. Thank you for joining me this week and have a great one.